It is Monday, August 19th. I'm working from home today and it is my lunch break. So I just wanted to come on here and chat a little bit. I haven't done a reading vlog in a very long time. Definitely not since I've started working. And I have been wanting to get back to doing them, but it's just been hard to figure out times that I can actually film footage. I also find after work I'm exhausted, so this is my first week of trying it and we'll see how this goes. So far, August has been a really great reading month. I have finished 3 books so far. So the first book I read this month was Every Day is for the Thief by Teju, and I really liked that. I read it over a period of 4 days. It was very short. I think it was like a 4-hour audiobook. So this book covered this man who was originally from Nigeria, was then living in America and returns back home to Nigeria. It doesn't necessarily reflect my experience or my relationship with Nigeria because I wasn't born there, but would be more like what I expect returning home to Nigeria feels like for my parents. And so a lot of what the main character was talking about is the experience of returning to the corruption, the vigilante justice, all of those aspects of living in Nigeria. It was a very well written book. I really liked Teju's writing style. It was very poetic, very enchanting. After that, I read Cobalt, How the Blood of the Congo Powers Our Lives. And I read that from August 4th to August 12th. So it took me a little while to get through that one. Overall, it was good. I don't know how I feel about it though. I don't know what I would rank it. I just find in general nonfiction tends to be a bit dry and a bit difficult to get through. It did get to the point where it felt a little bit repetitive, but the information is obviously very important, looking at child labor in the Congo, how dangerous it is in these mines where people are getting cobalt, which are used in things like smartphones, laptops, electric vehicles. So overall very informative. I just almost feel like a long form article may have been better than reading this entire book. So I am now exploring to see if there are articles that I would recommend, just because not everyone has time to read a book like this. And if I wasn't listening to the audiobook, I don't think I would have gotten through it. It does have good parts of it, but yeah, just a little bit long for a book. And then the last book I read was The Prophet. I finished that on August 15th. I am obsessed with that book. I think it is amazing. I gave it 5 stars and it was just so beautiful, so poetic. I actually was listening to it as an audiobook on my walk to work every day, and it just allowed me to start my day in such a positive mindset. It essentially is a series of essays, but it's fiction because you have these people asking this man who is the prophet questions on like life, love, beauty, good and evil, and then he goes on these monologues that are just so beautifully written, so poetic, very meditative and very enchanting. So far that is definitely my favorite novel of this year, and I had never read anything by Khalil Gibran. I've heard of his name before, but had never read his work. The audiobook that I have also includes The Wanderer, which is another book by him. So I probably will end up listening to that too, just because I really enjoyed his writing. Right now, I am listening to a few other audiobooks. I spent a bit of time this morning as I was making my breakfast listening to the Anticapitalist book on fashion, which I am trying to finish. I think my criticism of this is similar to the issue I had with Cobalt. It's just a little bit tedious to get through. I'm looking for nonfiction books that are very well written and are very enjoyable, and I do find with a lot of modern nonfiction books, they seem to be written for a very basic audience, and by that I mean I don't find the language used by the author to be particularly challenging. Whereas I compare a book like Pedagogy of the Oppressed by Paulo Freire, which I read back in June, I think it was, either June or July, and that book I really enjoyed because it was very intellectually challenging. So I think that's just what I'm struggling with the nonfiction books that I picked for this month. They're not as challenging as I would want them to be, so I'm learning the information, but I'm not really improving my language or learning about different writing styles, that sort of thing. I'm really hoping to finish it today because I just never go back to it, and so I just want to finish it and be done. And I find I have a little bit more energy the days that I work from home as opposed to the days that I go into the office. So my plan, fingers crossed, is to finish the Anticapitalist book of fashion today. I also plan to finish today Assembly by Natasha Brown, which I started reading yesterday. It's a very short audiobook. It's around 2 hours long, and I typically listen to most fiction audiobooks at 1.5 speed, so it'll take me less than 2 hours to finish it. I'm actually liking this more than I thought. It reminds me a little bit of I'm a Fan by Sheena Patel. I think that's her name. They're both British writers, both BIPOC women, and it's funny. It's sort of talking about what is seen as success for people of color, especially women of color, and a lot of the time it is like, you know, getting a good job, having financial stability, finding a partner, getting married, and the author is just questioning all of those milestones that have been laid out for her and deciding whether she wants to set her own path and create her own way. As a single woman in her 30s, I definitely can relate to that. I think what society tells us is going to bring fulfillment or satisfaction or happiness is not necessarily true. So I'm interested to see where it ends. I don't want to talk about it too much more until I finish it, because the conclusion may be very different than I expect it to be. I also am reading Orbital by Samantha Harvey. This was nominated, or is nominated, for the Man Booker Prize. I am not loving this book. I'm about halfway through, and I started this book, I actually think, the same day I started Every Day is for the Thief by Teju. So that gives you an idea. I've like picked up multiple books since then and still haven't finished this one. It's very experimental, which I like, but it just feels very repetitive. I feel like so far, if this was like a novella, maybe like 2 hours long, I think I would have liked it, but a lot of the chapters just feel very repetitive and I'm not really getting much out of it. So I'm kind of at the point now where I'm like, okay, just spend like an hour every day listening to it and you'll eventually be done. But I don't get excited about listening to this one. So definitely not my favorite, but still interesting. And then the last book I am currently reading is There by Tommy Orange. I did listen to quite a bit of it yesterday. I'm around 8% of the way through this one. I like it so far. I'm obviously still very early into it, and I'm really enjoying this one character who was actually born with fetal alcohol syndrome. So the character is just talking about the impact of that on them. I think he refers to it as the drome and how it's affected sort of his facial features and also affected his intelligence, but how he came across MF Doom and fell in love with his music. And I always have loved hip-hop. Haven't really listened to it as much as I used to, which I feel like is a whole other thing that I need to unpack and explore. The character talked about how he loved MF Doom because he understood his lyrics. And yeah, just the beauty of words, of music, of being able to feel a certain feeling even though you have a different lived experience. So far I've been liking There. It's not the book I typically would read, and if I were to write a book it wouldn't be like this, but that doesn't take away from the fact that I think it is a good and interesting book nonetheless. So those are the books that I'm reading. I actually got an order from Book Outlet. I've had all these issues with this package. I thought that they didn't deliver it properly and I was gonna come on here and be like, do not order from them, but I think it was an issue with my building, so I want to see if I can get the package and then do a little bit of an unboxing. So I will show you the books that I ordered. I will eventually do a proper book haul talking about the books in more detail, but I just wanted to show you what I got and sort of the quality of the items. So this book that has the messed up back is A Mind Spread Out on the Ground by Alicia Elliott, and this is a series of essay collections by an Indigenous author. I read this back in either January or February, so I wanted to pick that up. I also picked up Every Day is for the Thief by Teju, which I was just talking about. And I will just say, in terms of quality, so I've noticed this on the first two books, they have a little black dot on them. It's not that obvious on that one, but it definitely is more obvious here. So it doesn't really bother me. I read lots of books, so I don't want to spend tons of money. So the other thing I would say is I noticed on this book, Every Day is for the Thief, that there was like a page that was sort of sticking out a bit, and then I flipped to that page and it is like bent. So just things to be aware of if you are buying from somewhere like this. To me, it reminds me a little bit of buying like a used book. Everything's not going to be perfect. I don't mind. I like to write in my books. I like to underline in pen. I like to annotate them. So I don't mind that they aren't perfect, but if you are someone who likes pristine books, this is probably not where you should order them from. I do think their hardcovers might be a bit better, and this is Tremor by Teju. Also has the black dot, but it's very small and definitely in much better condition than the paperbacks. I don't actually really know what this is about, but I do want to read it. I came across this book first, and then I decided to go with Teju's older book just because I like reading their older books first and then sort of seeing how they progress. This might be nominated for a Man Booker Prize. That might be how I came across it. I actually don't remember, but I think it's a really pretty cover. Okay, and next we have The Right to Sex by Amia Srinivasan. I kind of wish I got this in a hardcover. I don't know why I didn't. Maybe they didn't have it, because I think I'm going to refer to this book a lot. This is another book that I've read, and Amia Srinivasan is actually a professor of philosophy at Oxford University in England, and a really interesting look at sort of feminism, this idea of consent and sex in current day society. Very interesting book. I really enjoyed it. Also very well written. Like, this is a nonfiction book that I thought was well written, was challenging. I enjoyed the writing style a lot. I will eventually do a review on this because I did really like this. Definitely one of my favorite nonfiction books I've read so far this year, and really good if you're looking for an introductory book that looks at modern day feminism. And in terms of quality, the pages are okay, but we got another dot. The next one I have is A Small Place by Jamaica Kincaid. This is a very short book. It's actually nonfiction. It's very funny. It's an essay looking or critiquing the tourist industry in Antigua, which is where Jamaica Kincaid is from. I read this either just before or just after I went on a cruise to some of the islands in the Caribbean for my mom's 60th birthday, and I was trying to read books by authors from those countries, and I then realized Jamaica Kincaid was from Antigua, which is one of the islands we stopped at, so I wanted to give this a read. I will reread this and then do a review. This is said to be compared to Gulliver's Travels, so I want to read Gulliver's Travels first and then come back to this and then talk about it, but really, really good book. Like, one of my favorite nonfiction reads so far this year. And then the last book that I have here, I'm glad I got this one as a hardcover, is A Passage North by Anuk Arudpragasam. I actually don't think I've talked a ton about this book on my channel, even though it is so far one of my favorite fiction books I've read this year. I am obsessed with this author. I need to read his other book, The Story of a Brief Marriage. Even though I know I said The Prophet is my favorite fiction book so far this year, that book was more like philosophical in nature. When I think about a contemporary work of literary fiction, this is definitely my favorite. This author just is so mesmerizing in his writing style. The first page and a half, I just felt like I was entranced by his writing. Not much happens in this book, so if you're not someone who likes a book that is more contemplative in nature, I wouldn't recommend it. If you like an action-filled book, don't go for this. But if you want a book that meditates on some of life's big ideas or issues, like aging, war, time, highly recommend this one. I really, really, really enjoyed it. I listened to it as an audiobook, which I would 100% wholeheartedly recommend. And so this book has a nice big dot along the bottom. So again, I think if those sorts of things bother you, then probably don't order from Book Outlet. That stuff doesn't bother me. I write up all over my books. I don't really care if they have tons of marks. But yeah, so I will eventually do a little haul on those books, talking about them in a bit more detail. I just wanted in this video to just show you the quality of the books from Book Outlet. I find that they will probably be my go-to place to get nonfiction books because I typically don't love the nonfiction books I read, but I want to refer to them because there's some information in them that's useful. So being able to get a hardcover book for $12.99 for a book that I don't love just seems like good bang for your buck. And I did just want to talk very quickly about annotation because I've sort of figured out an annotation method that I'm quite liking, and so I wanted to share. I typically listen to audiobooks, although there have been a few books that I've been reading the physical book. Mainly that happens when there's no audiobook available. Like I am currently working through The Wretched of the Earth by Frantz Fanon, and this is not available as an audiobook. So I have been sitting and reading like 5 pages or so at a time as I'm on the train during my commute. And I went over the weekend to a friend's house, which was about a 40-minute train ride. So I got through a nice solid chunk of it during that trip. And so what I just do is I read the book along with my handy blue pen, and I like to underline as I'm going. That's how I like to read physical books as I'm reading them. When I come back is I then add in my little post-its so I can see where the annotations are. With a book like this that I am going out and about and reading, I don't really like to put the little flags until I get back home. I just find those flags get bent really easily when you put them in your bag, so I don't really like to add them until the book is going to be back at home on a regular basis. But with books that I'm listening to as audiobooks, I like to annotate as I'm going. So an example is War and Peace. I know I made a video, I can't remember when it was, a few months ago for a War and Peace reading vlog, and I know I have not posted anything since then. I am still working through this. It is like, it is very slow. It is very, very, very slow. So I sort of jump back in and out of it, but I'm now at a point where I'm almost done the first book. So I want to try and finish that by the end of August so that I can have a part 2 to my War and Peace reading vlog talking about the first section. This isn't a good example really because I do tend to annotate in one color only, but this one what I do is I listen to it and then I will bookmark the audiobook, and then I usually do this in evening after work. I'll go through the bookmarks on my audiobook and then transfer them to the physical book and underline and then add the tab at the same time. So that's how I found it best to annotate. I just find doing it as you go is the best way. Saying that, I think with this one I was just tabbing and then I'm gonna come back and underline, but I don't really find that system works well for me. And then I found that underlining in pen is a little bit better than underlining in pencil. It just shows up a little bit better in pictures. And I always worry with pencil that it's eventually gonna fade, so that's why I like to do it in a nice blue pen. Just wanted to talk a little bit about my annotation style just in case anyone has questions about that sort of thing. I used to love watching videos where people talk about the way that they annotate books. I have previously done like different colored tabs for different issues, and I think if I am probably rereading a book, I would possibly do that. But I just think the first time I'm reading a book, I'm not sure of what all the themes are gonna be. I'm not sure where the annotations are going to go, so I just like to pick one color, use that throughout the whole book, and underline, and just know I have the key passages underlined in tab that I can refer to. I don't really worry about the different colors for the annotation and for the tabs. That's why I was like, this isn't really a good example because I started off trying to do different colors based on the different ideas, and I was just like, no, I'm not doing that anymore. It's going to take too long. So I will probably eventually change those tabs at the beginning as I go. Okay, so I think that's everything for today's reading vlog. I will be back, I don't know when, hopefully tomorrow, to talk about finishing up Assembly and the Anticapitalist book of Fashion, but I don't know. I don't want to force myself to do that if I'm not able to get to it. I will see you. It is a very dull Monday and I want to get back to work, so I'll see you. Hi, so I am filming another part of my book outlet haul. I don't usually order as many books as this, I promise. I had a bit of a backlog of books that I needed to order, so that's why I have a lot in this video. So this set of books are actually mainly non-fiction. The first one I have is Tyranny of the Minority by Stephen Levitsky and Daniel Ziblatt. Not going to talk about this one too much because I talked about it in one of my wrap-up videos. I think it was my May wrap-up. But this is an interesting look into American democracy and part of the reasons why there were certain elements of American democracy that favored minority rule. And those are things like the filibuster, decisions of the Supreme Court, that sort of thing. In terms of quality, I think in pretty good shape. Just has a little dot along the bottom here, but I do think the hardcovers overall from Book Outlet tend to be fairly decent. The next book I have here is Cobalt Red, How the Blood of the Congo Powers Our Lives. In terms of quality, pretty good quality actually. I don't think this one even has a dot on it, so yeah, no issues with this whatsoever. I also picked up The Everything War, Amazon's Ruthless Quest to Own the World and Remake Corporate Power by Dana Mattioli. So for a while now, I've been trying as much as possible to boycott Amazon, and I essentially will buy things from anywhere except for Amazon unless I have absolutely no choice. Which I will say I'm surprised by how many things you can only get on Amazon. It's actually very infuriating. I often get asked why I'm not buying from Amazon, and some people think I'm being a little bit over the top. So I wanted to read a book about it and really be able to summarize my thoughts as to why I don't shop there. Not saying no one should shop there. I understand the convenience of Amazon and the need for Amazon, but I personally have made the choice to not shop there, and I just feel like I want to be able to articulate clearly the reasons why I don't want to support Amazon and why I'm choosing to shop in alternative places. So I also have this as an audiobook, and I have been listening to the audiobook. I don't always like reading nonfiction in order. So I actually started with the last chapter, which was about the FTC, Federal Trade Commission, I believe they're called, suing Amazon, and that was a really interesting chapter. But I will probably start from the beginning this time and give this a read, listening to the audiobook and marking up the physical copy. So I also picked up Assembly by Natasha Brown, which is a really nice short novel. I talked about this earlier on in this vlog, so I'm not really going to talk about it too much. I did finish this. I finished this last week, and overall I really enjoyed it. I wasn't sure, like when I finished it, I was like, oh, that wasn't the ending I expected, but I had a little bit of time to think about it, and I think it was the perfect ending. But anyway, I'm not going to spoil it, but I did like it, and it's a very short book. I think it was like a 2-hour audiobook, so nice, short, and sweet. And then the final book I picked up, this one I actually don't know a lot about, so hopefully I like it, but it's called The Patriarchs, The Origins of Inequality by Angela Saini. And this book explains the roots of what we call patriarchy from prehistory to the present. The author travels to the world's earliest known human settlements to analyze the latest research findings in science and archaeology, and to trace the cultural and political histories of gendered power and oppression. What results is a profoundly hopeful exploration of diversity in human arrangements that undercuts old narratives and exposes male supremacy as no more than an ever-shifting element in systems of control. So seems to be sort of like a historical look at the origins of patriarchy. So sounded interesting, so picked it up. Okay, it is Sunday, August 25th. And this is probably going to be the final day of this reading vlog. So there's 1 week left in August, and for a lot of months where I started off and I've read quite a number of books by now, I then try and push myself and read like larger books or that sort of thing. Not really interested in doing that this month. I think I just have too much going on. But I did sit and think, if there is one book or two books that I want to read by the end of the month, what would those be? The first new book I'm starting that I want to read by the end of the month is Fathers and Sons by Ivan Turgenev. I think that's how you pronounce his last name, but I might be a little bit off. Yeah, so I've owned this book for a while. I actually don't know when I bought it, but this is it here. And it's this story about the son who comes back home along with his friend Bazarov. Bazarov is said to be one of the first nihilistic characters in literature. Can't really say what that means yet, but I was talking to my brother about nihilism versus existentialism, and I realized I don't fully understand all of that, so I wanted to give this a read. I've read bits and pieces of this book for the past few years, but I've never committed to finishing it. But I started it again today when I went grocery shopping and I was listening to the audiobook. I like when authors have a lot of fun with the language that they're using. So he's used terms such as revelry, ruminations, just really have been enjoying this book. And it's fairly short. I think it's about an 8-hour audiobook. So my plan is to finish this by the end of the month. So the second book that I started reading today that I want to finish by the end of the month is On the Genealogy of Morals by Friedrich Nietzsche. So I purchased this and Beyond Good and Evil from a used bookstore, and I just never got around to reading either of them. And I borrowed a copy of the audiobook of this from my local library, and I realized it's due back in 4 days. And I do believe I had to wait a while to get it, so I was like, okay, no, let me actually listen to it. I've borrowed it a few times and just always let my loan expire because I never got around to finishing it. So I listened to this morning as I was cleaning. Really good book if you're cleaning, because it's complicated enough that it still captures your interest while you're doing something very mundane. Like, I ended up cleaning for so long. I really wanted to finish the first essay. I think I have 20 minutes of it left. So the first essay that I've been reading, table of contents. So the first essay is Good and Evil, Good and Bad. And in it, Nietzsche has been looking at where we got these concepts of good and evil from, talking about these ideas like pity and why is it that pity is seen as a good thing, and then looking into first Judaism and then Christianity, and talking about how in these religious traditions, what Nietzsche calls like a slave morality, so things like humility, turning the other cheek, loving one's neighbor were seen to be good things, whereas Nietzsche questions that and takes issue with it. Very interesting, and he actually quotes some like Christian philosophers like Thomas Aquinas and things like that. Definitely a book that you're not going to be able to get everything out of it the first time. And I know one of his essays, I think it's the third one, What Do Aesthetic Ideals Mean? He talks about it in the preface as an essay that will help you to be able to understand Nietzsche as a whole, because he uses like aphorisms which make it so that even if you read something that he says, you then actually do have to go back and like reread or spend some time, as he says, ruminating on his concepts and ideas. So it's not something that you're going to be able to walk away having finished and fully understand. It does seem like something you have to read over and over again, and something you need to read, put down, and think about, which I like. I think the best sorts of books are ones that you continuously think about and question. So I have been really enjoying this. This is a philosophy book that is relatively enjoyable to read. Like, Nietzsche writes as if he is writing fiction, and by that I mean a lot of nonfiction books, and especially philosophy books, are very dry. This is a very engaging read. As I'm reading it, I am challenged by the words Nietzsche is using. His sentences are very poetic and very beautiful. So I can see why people like him. I definitely can. So these are the two books that I started today, and I'm hoping to finish by next Saturday. And the only other books that I also still need to finish are the Anticapitalist book of fashion. I still have to finish that. I think I have 2 hours left. And Orbital. Ugh. I really don't want to finish Orbital, but I should just finish it. So those are the two books that I'd started previously that I want to finish, and then these are the two new books that I picked up. So 2 classics, philosophy and a work of classical literature. I just realized this month I hadn't read any classics. I am reading War and Peace, but I'm definitely not going to finish that this month. And I didn't read any philosophy, and I really am trying to read more philosophy, so I wanted to try and read one book this week, which hopefully will allow me to be able to read more next month. So that is the end of my reading vlog. So I think that this is something I'm going to be able to continue doing. I don't know if I'm always going to be able to do one every week, but I'm going to try. I definitely will try. So thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. If you are new to my channel, this channel is all about re-education and decolonizing the mind. I created this channel because I decided to go on a journey of reading and learning lots of new things and decolonizing my own mind, and I wanted to create this channel so I could share what I'm reading with the world. If you are interested in following along with me on this journey, then feel free to subscribe. Bye.